Ever get that feeling, when your kids were little?
Yeah.
Like that fiercely protective,
Yeah.
kind of primal urge to keep them safe from absolutely everything?
Oh, yeah.
Well, crank that up to cosmic level.
Okay.
That's Demeter, the Greek goddess we're diving into today. She
Wow.
makes those mama bear moments look like a walk in the park. You all asked us to dig into Demeter's story, so we've got ancient hymns, insights from author and comedian Natalie Haynes,
Oh, cool.
and even some whispers about the Eleusinian mysteries. Those always sounded kind of mysterious.
Yeah, it's amazing how Demeter's story taps into that really deep, protective instinct we have, especially for those of you listening who've been parents yourselves.
Mhm.
She's often shown as this gentle, nurturing figure. But, the ancient stories paint a way more complex picture, like
Yeah.
one of crazy power and a willingness to literally shake the world to protect her daughter.
Right. It's not all just flowers and harvests with this goddess.
Yeah.
So let's start with like where Demeter fits in this whole divine family tree. We all know the big names, right? Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades. So where does she land in this whole pantheon power ranking?
She's a major player, essential. Ancient societies, their whole lives depended on the harvest. It was everything.
Right.
So Demeter's job, making sure there was that abundance,
Yeah.
well, that made her vital, probably more so than some of the flashier gods, I'd say.
Oh, definitely. Just a goddess of pretty flowers and easy harvests.
Right.
Speaking of appearances, how is she usually shown in art? All flowing robes and what are those things called?
Cornucopias.
Yeah, cornucopias. You're not wrong.
Okay.
Those are her classic looks for
Yeah.
sure. She's often pictured with Persephone, her daughter, carrying things like torches and those, iconic wheat stalks.
I do love a good wheat stalk.
But there are more, relatable depictions too.
Oh. Haynes mentions a vase in the British Museum where Demeter's on her way to a wedding with Hestia.
Okay.
It's almost like they're gossiping about the other guests.
I love that.
It adds this human touch, reminding us even goddesses have their social circles and everyday moments.
I need to see that vase.
Yes.
But before we get lost in museum daydreams, let's talk about Demeter's, let's say, darker side.
Okay.
Starting with King Erichthonius. This guy learned the hard way not to mess with Mother Nature, right?
He did. He chose to chop down trees in Demeter's sacred grove, ignored a tree nymph who, flat out warned him about how powerful the goddess was. Now, Demeter's first reaction was surprisingly measured. She just appeared to him and said, "Stop."
Stop.
Yeah, just a warning, not full-on divine punishment.
So reasonable, right?
Right.
A chance to course correct.
Exactly. But Erichthonius, maybe blinded by arrogance, just ignored her.
Oh.
And that's when she unleashes this truly terrifying curse. Insatiable hunger. And I don't mean I could use a snack.
Right.
It's this relentless, all-consuming hunger that makes him devour everything he sees.
Yikes.
Even things you can't eat, like rocks and dirt.
Everything.
Imagine that emptiness, nothing can ever fill it.
Oh, wow. Definitely gives a whole new meaning to hangry.
Right.
But that pales in comparison to what happens next. The abduction of Persephone, her daughter. Can you set the scene?
Okay, so picture this. Persephone, daughter of Demeter and Zeus, which, thinking about it now, those family dynamics are a little eyebrow-raising.
Yeah, we'll do.
She's playing in a field, lured by these insanely beautiful flowers created by Gaia, the earth goddess. It's all part of some bigger plan.
Right.
And suddenly the earth splits open, out bursts Hades and his chariot.
Wow.
He grabs Persephone and they disappear back into the underworld.
Scary.
Oh, terrifying.
And Demeter, well, she doesn't exactly take it well.
No, not at all. Persephone screams, but her cries, they just fade away. Only Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, and Helios, the all-seeing sun god, hear them.
Wow.
Demeter, she senses her daughter's terror, and she's just plunged into absolute despair. Her grief, it's almost a physical thing.
Yeah.
She refuses to go back to Olympus, neglects all her duties. It's like the rawest, most agonizing grief of a mother separated from her child.
Powerful.
It's a reminder that even goddesses, they experience the depths of human emotion.
Right. This definitely shatters that image of Demeter as just a passive, nurturing figure.
Right.
Her grief becomes like an active force shaping the world around her.
Yeah.
And it leads her to take a pretty dramatic step. disguising herself as a mortal
She does.
and going into the human world.
She arrives at the court of Silius and Metanira.
King and queen, right?
King and queen, exactly.
Okay.
Looking for work as a nanny.
As a nanny.
And here's where we see another side of Demeter.
Okay.
A kind of clumsy attempt to blend in.
Wait, so she's this, like, towering, powerful goddess trying to pass as a regular person.
Yeah.
I'm picturing some seriously awkward moments.
Haynes points out the humor in Demeter's, like, not-so-subtle disguise. She's probably radiating this aura of power, and everyone's thinking, wait, do I know you from somewhere?
Right. Have we met?
But the important thing is they still welcome her in.
Okay.
And that says a lot about Xenia, the ancient Greek idea of hospitality. It was more than just being polite. It was like a sacred duty to offer food and shelter to strangers, no matter who they were.
I like that.
This act of kindness, even to a goddess in disguise, it creates a real bond.
That's good, because I imagine even a goddess in disguise could use some kindness, especially going through what she was.
Definitely.
Speaking of kindness, let's talk about Iambe, the servant woman who tries to lift Demeter's spirits with humor.
Yeah.
That takes guts, right?
It does. So picture this. Demeter, lost in her grief, refusing food, sitting silently on this simple stool.
Okay.
And here comes Iambe. She recognizes how deep Demeter's pain is.
And she tries to connect through, like, jokes and humor.
Jokes.
It's beautiful, really. It shows how sometimes when words fail, laughter can be that bridge, you know?
Yeah.
It might seem strange, but it speaks to the power of human connection, especially in times of sorrow.
So Iambe, servant and unofficial court jester, she gets some points for bravery and compassion.
Big time.
What happens next in Demeter's nanny adventures?
Well, she forms this deep bond with Demeter, the son of Silius and Metanira.
Okay.
Her love for him is so strong, she tries to make him immortal. But her methods, let's just say they were a little unconventional.
Uh-oh. Is this where we get into the don't try this at home part of the myth?
It is. Demeter, in her well-intentioned but kind of terrifying way, decides to make Demeter immortal by feeding him ambrosia, the food of the gods.
Ambrosia.
And putting him in the fire each night to burn away his mortality.
In the fire.
Yeah, she meant it as a gift, but, you know, from a human perspective, pretty horrifying.
Putting a baby in the fire is a bit beyond helicopter parent. Right. Even for a goddess. I can only imagine Metanira walking in on that.
It's this weird mix of tenderness and terrifying power that makes Demeter so captivating.
Yeah.
And it leads to her true identity being revealed.
No more nanny disguise. Time for Demeter to, like, fully embrace her goddess status and unleash some serious power.
Exactly. Still consumed by grief and rage over Persephone, Demeter decides to show the world just how important she is. She refuses to let the earth produce any fruit, causing this global famine.
Worldwide.
And I'm not talking about a couple bad harvests.
Right.
This is a full-blown ecological disaster. Plants wither, crops fail, and humanity is, like, on the edge of starvation.
I bet that got Zeus's attention. No more divine parties on Mount Olympus when everyone's starving.
You got it. He tries sending other gods and goddesses to, like, appease Demeter, showering her with gifts and promises, but she's not having it. Her only focus is get Persephone back.
Right.
Nothing else matters.
A mother's determination.
Does Zeus finally realize he messed with the wrong goddess? You don't mess with the one who controls the food supply.
He does. And the wake-up call comes in the form of, like, dwindling sacrifices. Remember, no harvest means no food for humans, which means no offerings to the gods. Zeus, realizing his power is directly tied to, you know, how well humanity's doing, he finally gets serious about fixing this.
Yeah. So he needs a plan, and fast. What does the king of the gods come up with to fix this mess?
Yeah.
And appease the goddess who, like, literally holds the world's food in her hands?
He sends Hermes, the messenger god, you know, down to the underworld to bring Persephone back.
To the underworld.
Yeah. Hermes, he's always such a smooth talker. He actually manages to convince Hades to let her go.
Oh, wow.
But Hades, being Hades, you know,
yeah,
he can't resist throwing in a little twist.
of course not, right? Got to complicate things. What did he do?
He tricks Persephone into eating pomegranate seeds.
Pomegranate seeds.
Just a few. And here's where it gets interesting. In Greek mythology, if you eat food from the underworld, it binds you to that realm.
So he, like, basically force-fed Persephone these magical pomegranate seeds.
Yeah.
So she'd have to go back to the underworld.
Exactly.
That seems less like a romantic gesture and more like a power move.
Totally. Haynes really emphasizes this isn't some lovesick god thing. It's a calculated move, a way for Hades to stay in control.
Wow, talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
But let's go back for a second. You mentioned those Eleusinian mysteries earlier.
Yes.
Those secret rituals, the ones connected to Demeter and Persephone. What can you tell us about them? They sound like the ancient Greek version of a, super exclusive club.
They were. And what's so frustrating is we only have these tiny bits of info about what actually happened during the rituals.
Really?
Yeah. Haynes says ancient writers, they thought it was taboo to reveal too much.
Oh, wow.
So they basically say, we can't talk about that and just move on.
So frustrating.
It's like reading a history book with all the good parts missing.
Ugh, total tease. But from what we do know, those Eleusinian mysteries were a big deal, right?
Huge. People traveled from all over Greece to be part of them, like a pilgrimage, a journey to connect to something bigger than themselves.
Right.
And it wasn't just a one-time thing. There were different levels of initiation. Each one revealed deeper truths about Demeter, Persephone, and that whole cycle of life and death.
So there's this air of mystery, sacred knowledge, maybe
Yeah.
even some ancient Greek psychedelia going on.
Possibly. We know they used a special drink called kykeon during the rituals.
Pykeon.
Haynes describes it as barley, water, and herbs all mixed together.
Sounds healthy.
I don't know how tasty it was, but it was a key part of the whole experience.
Well, they say it's about the journey, not the destination. So what was the point of all this? Why go to all that trouble?
It seems the main focus was the afterlife.
The afterlife.
Yeah. Those who were initiated were promised a better, happier existence after death. Remember that line in the Homeric hymn where Demeter tells Metanira that people who understand the mysteries, they're favored in the afterlife?
Bro.
It's almost like a spiritual insurance, a better deal in the great beyond.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about making Demeter happy for a good harvest.
Right.
It was about getting a good spot in the afterlife, too. Seems like a good deal. But let's get back to Persephone. What happens when she finally sees her mother again?
Their reunion is pure joy, just like relief and that unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful moment. Like, even after such hardship, there's still love and hope.
I like that. But what about the pomegranate seeds? Is Persephone stuck in the underworld forever because of Hades' trick?
Not forever. Since she only ate a few seeds, she has to spend part of the year in the underworld with Hades
Okay.
and the rest of the time on Earth with Demeter.
So that's how the ancient Greeks explained the seasons changing.
Exactly. Demeter's joy brings spring and summer when Persephone's home.
Right.
And her grief, it plunges the world into winter when Persephone goes back to the underworld.
It's like nature itself mirroring her emotions. Speaking of challenging assumptions, what does Natalie Haynes have to say about Demeter? You mentioned she sees her as more than just a fertility goddess.
Yeah. Haynes argues Demeter's story, it goes way beyond just agriculture or the changing seasons.
Okay.
She sees Demeter as this incredibly strong figure, embodying the fierce, unwavering love of a mother.
Powerful.
And Haynes argues it's that love that ultimately forces even Zeus to give in.
It's like Demeter saying, I'm serious. Bring back my daughter, or the world will pay the price.
Right. And Haynes points out how Demeter is often underestimated because she's seen as this gentle, nurturing figure.
Yeah.
But her story reminds us that even the kindest, most loving beings can have a ferocious side when someone threatens the people they love.
It's about protecting what matters no matter what.
Exactly.
So we shouldn't mistake her nurturing for weakness. She's a force to be reckoned with. A reminder that motherhood can be a source of immense power.
Definitely.
But before we wrap up this part, let's touch on something you mentioned earlier, the darker side of Demeter's story.
Okay.
You said we'd be talking about those societal norms in ancient Greece, how they're reflected in these myths. What did you mean by that?
It's important to remember these stories weren't just like made-up tales, right?
Right.
They reflected the beliefs, values, and social structures of the people who created them.
Okay.
And when we look at Demeter and Persephone now, there are some parts that are a bit unsettling, especially when it comes to consent and control. We've talked about Hades kidnapping and forcing Persephone to marry him. But even Zeus's involvement in the beginning, it's troubling.
So even though he tries to fix it later, Zeus was initially okay with his brother basically kidnapping and coercing his own niece.
It seems that way, at least according to the Homeric hymn.
Wow.
And this really highlights how patriarchal the Greek pantheon was.
Patriarch?
Yeah. Male gods often had power over goddesses, even their own family.
It's a good reminder that even in stories about gods, we see those real-world power dynamics and societal norms that we might find, well, problematic today.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to acknowledge those issues, not to dismiss the myths, but to understand them in their historical and cultural context. It's about appreciating these stories while recognizing that they come from a worldview very different from our own.
That's a really good point. It's about engaging with these myths thoughtfully, right?
Yeah.
Not just accepting them at face value, but understanding them as products of their time.
Exactly.
But before we get too deep into the philosophy of it all, let's finish this part of our Demeter deep dive. What can our listeners expect in the final segment?
Okay, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Demeter. And I have to say, my whole image of her, as this gentle harvest goddess, totally changed.
Yeah, it's amazing how her story still grabs us after all this time, thousands of years later. She's not just some, like, relic of the past.
Right. She speaks to something so deep in us about love, about grief, about that powerful connection between a mother and her child.
It's true. Those themes, they really resonate. It's like they connect us to that ancient world, like it goes beyond time and culture.
Definitely.
And you mentioned earlier the importance of symbols in Demeter's story.
Yeah.
Like those torches, the wheat stalks, the pomegranates,
Sure.
they're not just there to look pretty, right? They're like clues to unlock deeper meaning.
Exactly. Think of them as visual cues. They trigger a deeper understanding, connecting us to how the ancients used symbols.
Okay, so let's break down a few. We've got the torches, representing Demeter's relentless search for Persephone, and the wheat stalks, well, those seem pretty obvious, right? They represent the harvest.
On the surface, yes. But wheat, it also signifies nourishment, growth, and that cycle of life and death. Remember how Demeter's grief makes the crops die?
Right.
It's a powerful image, a metaphor for the loss of abundance, of life itself. And when Persephone comes back, the earth flourishes again,
Yeah.
symbolizing renewal and rebirth.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like nature itself mirroring Demeter's emotions.
Hmm.
Now, the pomegranate, that's where things get a little more complicated. It's a symbol of fertility and abundance,
Right.
but also this reminder of Persephone's, being trapped in the underworld. How do we make sense of those two opposite meanings?
That's what's so cool about symbols. They can hold multiple meanings, even contradictory ones. The pomegranate in this story, it embodies that duality. Life and death, that bittersweet reality we all face.
Yeah.
Persephone eating the seeds, it ties her to the underworld, but it also elevates her, makes her powerful as the queen of that realm.
So it's not just about being stuck there. It's about, like, change and power.
Exactly. And don't forget, pomegranates were really connected to female fertility in ancient Greece. So there's this added layer of meaning about Persephone's role, as a goddess of the underworld, a place where life begins and ends, always regenerating.
Wow. I'm starting to see how these symbols add so much depth to the myths. It's like they're talking to us on different levels, inviting us to dig deeper, to explore those nuances.
That's exactly what Natalie Haynes wants us to do. Engage with these myths actively. Ask questions, analyze, and find what they mean to you. She challenges that simple idea of Demeter as just a mother goddess, reminding us she's a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of strength, a reminder of the power within women.
So Demeter's story isn't just some entertaining tale from ancient Greece.
No.
It's a timeless message about love, loss, and the enduring power of the feminine.
Absolutely. And that's why her story still speaks to us today. It taps into those universal experiences, the connections we have, the challenges we face, and the hope for renewal, for rebirth, finding strength even in the darkest times.
This deep dive has been eye-opening for sure. Demeter's a lot more complex and powerful than I ever thought. What's the one thing you want listeners to take away from all this?
The most important thing, I think, is to remember there's always more to learn, more to uncover. Don't be afraid to question things, to challenge your own ideas, and find your own meaning in the stories and symbols that speak to you.
So the next time we see, like, an image of Demeter and Persephone or something about those Eleusinian mysteries, we shouldn't just focus on how beautiful it is. We should think about the deeper message, what it's really trying to say.
Right.
It's like a portal to a whole other world filled with ancient wisdom and truths that are still relevant today.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe you'll even want to do your own deep dive into mythology. It's a journey full of surprises and insights.
Well, if this deep dive into Demeter's world has made you curious, we encourage you to explore more. Check out your local museum, pick up a book on Greek mythology, or even just do a quick search online. You might be surprised by what you find. And if you like this exploration, be sure to subscribe to the Deep Dive for more fascinating journeys into the stories and ideas that matter. Until next time, keep diving.